It was a cold Tuesday evening, November 14, 2017. The kind of cold that bites through your jacket and makes you wish you'd stayed home. Inside a small roadside diner, yellow lights cast a soft glow on the empty booths. Sarah, a tired waitress in her late 20s, was refilling sugar jars, counting the minutes until her shift ended. Then the door opened. A man stepped in, thin, unshaven, his clothes worn and frayed. He looked like he hadn't had a warm meal in days. He didn't head straight for a table. He just stood there, like he was wondering if he even belonged. Most people would have looked away. Sarah didn't. She walked over, not knowing that this tiny moment, just a plate of food, a little kindness, would set something in motion. Something that would come back years later, changing both of their lives forever. It was a Tuesday morning, October 14, 2014, and the streets outside of Benny's diner still carried the damp chill of last night's rain. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and buttered toast filled the air, while the low hum of the radio blended with the clinking of plates. Sarah, a young waitress in her mid-20s with sandy blonde hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, moved quickly between tables, refilling cups and scribbling down orders. Her uniform, a pale blue blouse tucked neatly into a black skirt, was crisp, but her eyes carried the quiet fatigue of someone who'd been on her feet since dawn. That's when she noticed him. A man in his late 40s, clothes worn thin and damp from the weather, sat alone in the farthest booth by the window. His hands, rough and calloused, rested on the table as if deciding whether to stay or slip back out into the street. His face told a story without a single word, deep lines carved by years of hardship, a short beard peppered with gray, and eyes that searched the room without meeting anyone's gaze. Sarah recognized hunger when she saw it, not just the kind that gnawed at your stomach, but the kind that lived in your bones. She stepped toward him with the same steady kindness she offered every customer, but this time, something told her this was different. Outside, the traffic light flickered from green to yellow, casting brief bursts of color across his weather-worn jacket. Inside, her hand tightened slightly on her notepad as she stopped at his table, ready to speak, not yet knowing this moment would linger in her memory for years. The man's voice was quiet, almost apologetic, when Sarah asked what he wanted to eat. "Just a cup of water," he said, his gaze fixed on the salt shaker as though it were easier to speak to than another person. The words made Sarah's chest tighten. She had worked here long enough to know what that meant. He didn't have the money. Without a second thought, she smiled and told him she'd be right back. In the kitchen, she told Benny, the owner, to make a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast, extra portions. She poured the man a steaming cup of coffee, the kind that could thaw the cold from someone's bones, and carried the food out herself. When she set the plate down in front of him, he froze. His hands hovered over the fork like he wasn't sure if it was real. "It's on the house," Sarah said softly, resting a hand on the edge of the table before walking away to give him privacy. From the counter, she watched him take the first bite, slow, careful, almost reverent, before eating as though he hadn't had a full meal in days. Every so often, he would pause, wipe at his eyes, then continue, as if each bite was reminding him of something he'd lost. The other customers glanced over briefly, but Sarah's attention never wavered. She didn't know his story, and he didn't offer it, but she felt the weight of it in the way he held that cup of coffee, cradling it like it was the only warmth he had left in the world. Outside, the rain clouds broke just enough for a narrow beam of sunlight to spill through the diner's window, landing directly on his table. It was as if, in that moment, the world wanted to give him a little light back. When the man finished, he didn't rush to leave. He sat there quietly, his shoulders relaxing for the first time since he'd walked through the door. Sarah brought him a slice of apple pie, still warm from the oven, without asking. His lips curved into the smallest smile, the kind that said thank you without words. After a few more minutes, he stood, pulling a worn, folded piece of paper from his pocket. I don't have money," he admitted, his voice low. "But I can leave you this." He placed the paper on the counter and gave her a nod before heading toward the door. Sarah picked it up. On it was a rough sketch of the diner, drawn in pencil with an artist's care. The details were exact: the counter stools, the chipped sugar dispenser, even the faded sign above the entrance. At the bottom, in neat block letters, it read, "For the kindness you didn't have to give." She looked up to call after him, but the man was already outside, stepping into the gray afternoon and disappearing into the street crowd. She stood there for a long moment, holding the paper, feeling like she'd just been given something worth far more than money. That night, as she was closing up, Sarah taped the drawing to the wall behind the counter. She didn't know why exactly, but something told her this moment wasn't over. The days turned into weeks, and the sketch on the wall became part of the diner's heartbeat. Customers would notice it, ask where it came from, and Sarah would tell the same brief story, never with drama, just the truth. One chilly Thursday morning in early February 1998, the bell above the door rang, and a man in a dark coat stepped in. He wasn't the same man from before, but he carried himself with the same quiet purpose. He asked for coffee, then glanced at the wall behind her. "You know who drew that?" he asked, pointing to the sketch. Sarah nodded, curiosity flickering in her chest. "Why?" The man set his mug down and leaned slightly closer. "Because I do. And I think you're going to want to hear the rest of his story." The air seemed to still for a moment as she studied his face, searching for clues. He didn't rush her, didn't push. Just waited. And for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt that same unexplainable pull she'd felt the day the hungry man walked in. Only now, it was stronger, like a door she didn't even know existed had just cracked open. The man introduced himself as Daniel, his voice steady but carrying a weight she couldn't quite place. He told her he had known the hungry man years ago, back when life had been much harder for both of them. As the steam from his coffee curled into the air, he shared pieces of a story that made Sarah lean closer without even realizing it. He spoke of cold nights spent on park benches, of friends lost along the way, and of the stranger she had fed that day, how that single act had changed more than she could imagine. Sarah felt her chest tighten as Daniel explained that the man had never forgotten her kindness. He had rebuilt his life, piece by piece, but had always planned to return, to thank her in person. Sarah swallowed hard, a warmth spreading through her that was laced with questions. She wanted to know where he was now, why he hadn't come himself, and why Daniel was the one delivering this message. Daniel took a breath, his eyes steady on hers. "Because," he said, "he's been waiting for the right moment, and that moment is almost here." The next afternoon, just as the clock above the counter struck 3, the diner's door opened and a man stepped inside. Sarah froze mid-motion, a coffee pot in her hand, her breath catching before she could even place why. He was older now, his hair streaked with silver, his frame lean but steady. His eyes, those same eyes she remembered from all those years ago, held a softness that nearly undid her. He walked toward her slowly, as if every step carried years of memories, and when he stopped at the counter, he smiled, a quiet, grateful smile. "You probably don't remember me," he began, his voice low, steady. "But I've been looking for you for a very long time." Sarah's throat tightened as she set the coffee pot down. The hum of the diner faded into the background, and for a moment, it was just the two of them. He told her how her kindness on that cold afternoon had given him more than a meal, it had given him the strength to keep going. Pulling a folded letter from his jacket, he placed it in her hand. "This is for you," he said. "From the man I used to be, to the woman who helped me believe I could be more." Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it, the words blurring as tears welled in her eyes. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm light across the counter, as if sealing a moment neither of them would ever forget. Sarah stood frozen for a moment after Daniel left, the brown envelope warm in her hands from where he'd pressed it into her palms. She walked slowly back to the counter, her heart pounding in her chest, the clink of coffee cups and low diner chatter fading into the background. With trembling fingers, she tore the seal and slid the contents into her hand. A thick cashier's check sat on top, the amount printed in bold, $50,000. Beneath it, a folded piece of paper in Daniel's neat handwriting. Her eyes scanned the words. "Sarah, you may not remember every detail of that cold afternoon years ago, but I do. I remember the way you smiled at me when I hadn't smiled in weeks. I remember you refilling my coffee without asking for payment. You treated me like a human being when I felt invisible. That day changed me. You gave me the hope I needed to keep going. I built a life from that hope, and I want you to know you had a hand in it. Please accept this. It's not just money, it's my way of saying thank you for saving me in more ways than you'll ever know." By the time she reached the bottom of the note, Sarah's vision blurred with tears. She pressed the paper to her chest and looked toward the door. The street outside was quiet, winter air drifting in each time a car passed. She hurried outside, scanning up and down the block, but Daniel was gone, just like before. The only sign of him was the faint scent of his cologne in the cold breeze and the sound of the diner door's soft chime fading behind her. Sarah smiled through her tears, holding the envelope close. Under her breath, she whispered, "Thank you, Daniel, wherever you are." Inside, life at the diner carried on, coffee pouring, forks clinking against plates. But for Sarah, the world felt a little warmer.